Snow fell gently over Montreal, layering every rooftop and sidewalk with a quiet white softness. Rachel walked along Saint Laurent Boulevard, her scarf pulled high over her face, her thoughts swirling heavier than the snowfall around her. It had been 2 months since the relationship ended. 2 months of replaying conversations, questioning her worth, and wondering why the ache inside refused to fade. She used to imagine her 30s differently. Stable, peaceful, maybe even joyful. But here she was, living alone in a small apartment in Plateau, going through the motions at work, feeling both invisible and exposed at the same time. That morning, her friend from church sent her a short text. "Read Matthew 5. I think it will speak to you." So now, sitting inside a warm cafe on St. Denis, fingers curled around a latte, Rachel opened her Bible app, and the very first words stunned her. "Blessed are the poor in spirit." She almost laughed. Blessed? She felt anything but blessed. But she kept reading. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Her throat tightened. She didn't often give herself permission to mourn, to admit that something inside hurt deeply. She always tried to be composed, productive, fine. But Jesus spoke directly to her hidden wound. "Blessed are the ones who ache. Blessed are the ones who feel like they've lost more than they can explain. Blessed are those who let themselves be honest. Blessed are the meek." She didn't see meekness as a strength, but Jesus said they would inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. She realized she'd been hungering for healing, for meaning, for stability, for something truer than the emotional chaos she'd been living in. And Jesus promised, they will be filled. She read slowly, letting every word soak into her wintered heart. Blessed are the merciful. Could she really forgive? Could she release the bitterness she carried? Blessed are the pure in heart. Her heart didn't feel pure, it felt cracked. But maybe purity wasn't perfection. Maybe it was honesty, sincerity, the willingness to return to God. Blessed are the peacemakers. She longed for peace, not just with others, but within herself. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. She felt misunderstood many times, even mocked for her faith. Maybe she wasn't alone in that either. Then Rachel reached the line that brought unexpected warmth into her chest. "Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." Rejoicing seemed impossible. But perhaps Jesus wasn't commanding emotion. He was inviting trust, inviting her to see a bigger story than her heartbreak. She scrolled down. "You are the salt of the earth." Rachel blinked in surprise. Her? Salt? She felt more like melted snow, fading, dissolving. But Jesus wasn't speaking of strength. He was speaking of purpose. Salt preserves. Salt heals. Salt gives flavor. Maybe her pain wasn't disqualifying her. Maybe it was shaping her into someone who could understand others deeply. Then came the line that pierced through her loneliness. "You are the light of the world." She had felt dim, hidden, unseen. But Jesus said light doesn't disappear. Even when it's covered by grief, light remains light. As she watched the snowy street outside the cafe window, people hurried past, bundled in thick coats. Montreal winters were long, and healing often felt even longer. But Jesus' words began melting some of the ice inside her. "Let your light shine." She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to be fully healed. She didn't need to be impressive. She just needed to be honest, open, present. A small light in a long winter. By the time she reached the part where Jesus said he came not to abolish, but to fulfill, something shifted within her. A gentle awareness that he came not to crush broken hearts, but to complete them. And when he spoke about reconciliation, forgiveness, purity of heart, radical love, turning the other cheek, Rachel felt both challenged and comforted. Jesus wasn't giving rules. He was describing a new kind of life, a heart transformed from the inside out. A blessed life, even in brokenness, even in winter, even in Montreal. Rachel whispered, Jesus, if this is the blessed life, teach me how to live it. Outside, snow continued falling softly. Inside, a different kind of softness began forming. The beginning of healing, slow but real. A week later, Montreal was caught in one of those bitter cold spells where every breath feels sharp and sidewalks turn into sheets of ice. Rachel wrapped her coat tighter as she stepped out of her apartment, heading toward Mount Royal for a quiet walk, a habit she had picked up since reading Matthew 5. Something about being in nature made her feel like she could breathe again. The morning was hushed, the kind of winter silence that feels almost holy. She found a spot near the frozen lake, sat on a wooden bench dusted with snow, and opened Matthew 6. The very first line felt like it was aimed straight at the ache beneath her ribs. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Rachel sighed. She had spent so much of her life trying to be seen, trying to appear strong, capable, collected. Even after her breakup, she smiled at work, kept conversations light, and told people she was doing better. But inside she felt invisible. Yet Jesus spoke gently. Your Father who sees what is done in secret. The words felt like a blanket of warmth in the bitter cold. God sees the tears she hides. He sees the prayers she whispers at night. He sees the small victories no one applauds. He sees her, not her performance, her heart. She kept reading. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. She had always imagined prayer as something public, structured, formal, something for people more spiritual than she felt. But Jesus painted an entirely different picture. Prayer wasn't a performance. Prayer was a conversation. Prayer was a place to rest. As she reopened her eyes, she read words she had heard as a child but never truly understood until now. Our Father in heaven. Father. Not distant, not abstract, not disappointed. A Father who knew her needs before she asked. A Father who didn't compare her to anyone else. A Father who welcomed her, not reluctantly, but joyfully. She whispered the prayers slowly, letting each phrase sink deeper. Your kingdom come. She longed for that, something better than the fractured world she knew. Give us today our daily bread. Daily, not everything at once, just enough for today. Forgive us, as we forgive others. Her chest tightened. Forgiveness was hard. The breakup had left scars. But something in Jesus' tone made her realize forgiveness wasn't excusing what happened. It was releasing her heart from imprisonment. Then came a line that felt like it was written for her winter anxiety. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Treasures weren't just money. They were expectations, relationships, approval, plans, things she clung to for safety. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Love, mercy, character, faith, things that couldn't be taken away by heartbreak or change. She continued, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Rachel realized her heart had been tied to someone who was never meant to be her anchor. The breakup didn't just hurt. It exposed where her treasure had been placed. Then Jesus' voice cut through her swirling thoughts. Do not worry about your life. She let out a shaky breath. Worry had become her second nature. Jesus continued. Look at the birds. Rachel looked up instinctively. A small sparrow hopped along the snowy path, puffed up against the cold. It wasn't sowing or storing or planning, and yet there it was, cared for, alive. Are you not much more valuable than they? Her eyes softened. Valuable, not tolerated, not replaceable. Valuable. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? She smiled weakly. Worry hadn't added anything. It had only drained her. Jesus pointed her gaze to the world around her again. See how the flowers of the field grow. She imagined summer wildflowers on Mount Royal, bright, delicate, effortless. If God clothes the grass, will he not much more clothe you? A question, but also a promise. Seek first his kingdom, and all these things will be given to you. She whispered, Lord, I don't know how, but I want to seek you first. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Montreal's winter was still long, still harsh. But something inside her was thawing. For the first time since the breakup, Rachel felt a quiet confidence. Not that everything would resolve instantly, but that she wasn't walking alone. She had a father who saw her, valued her, and carried her needs in his hands. Do not worry about tomorrow. She stood up, brushed snow from her coat, and whispered, Tomorrow can wait. Today, I'll trust. A few days later, Montreal was hit with a fierce winter storm, wind howling between apartment buildings, snow whipping sideways, the kind of storm that makes even the most familiar streets feel uncertain. From her window, Rachel watched snow swirl under the yellow glow of the streetlights. It felt strangely symbolic of her own life. Cold, chaotic, unpredictable. That evening, wrapped in a thick blanket, she opened her Bible to Matthew 7, the final chapter of the Sermon on the Mount. The first words were gentle but sharp. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Rachel exhaled slowly. She had judged herself harshly these past months, calling herself not enough, unlovable, too much, or not worth fighting for. She wasn't judging others. She was condemning herself. But Jesus continued, With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. What if she spoke to herself with the same mercy she would give a friend? What if God was inviting her to lay down self-judgment, to see herself with the compassion he offered in Matthew 5 and 6? She kept reading. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and ignore the plank in your own? But instead of guilt, she felt clarity. Jesus wasn't shaming. He was teaching humility, tenderness, the practice of seeing clearly. Then came a passage she remembered vaguely from childhood. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Ask, seek, knock. Simple verbs. But for the first time, they felt like permission. Permission to ask for healing. Permission to seek new beginnings. Permission to knock on the door of hope, even after heartbreak. Jesus continued, For everyone who asks receives. Everyone. Not the especially spiritual, not the perfect, not the ones who have everything together. Everyone. And then came one of the most tender pictures Jesus ever gave. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Rachel pictured a small child holding out their hands in trust. If you, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Good gifts. She whispered the phrase out loud. Maybe God wasn't withholding from her. Maybe the no she experienced in her relationship wasn't punishment, but protection. Maybe the ending wasn't a rejection, but a redirection. She turned the page, and her eyes landed on Jesus' next words. Enter through the narrow gate. It sounded strict, but then she realized narrow doesn't mean restrictive. It means focused, intentional, a life aligned with God, not the pressures around her. Jesus then warned of false prophets, those who appear gentle but bring harm. By their fruit you will recognize them. Rachel thought of her past relationship. So many charming words, so little fruit. Jesus wasn't just teaching theology. He was teaching discernment, wisdom, spiritual safety. And then she reached the part that felt like the entire Sermon on the Mount was building toward. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father. Authenticity, not appearances, not performance. Heart-level faith. Finally, she arrived at the closing image, one she had heard often but never truly felt until now. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The wind howled outside just then, rattling her window as though punctuating Jesus' words. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew. Yet the house did not fall, because its foundation was on the rock. Rachel felt the truth settle into her soul. Her storm was real, her pain was real, her winter was real. But so was the rock. Jesus wasn't asking her to ignore the storm. He was inviting her to build differently within it. A life anchored in humility, a heart shaped by mercy, a soul grounded in trust, a hope rooted in a Father who sees in secret, clothes the fields, feeds the birds, and calls her valuable. She reached the final words. He taught them as one who had authority. She closed her Bible, listening to the storm outside, not afraid of it now, not overwhelmed. If her life was being rebuilt, if her heart was being restored, if her future was being redirected, then she wanted Jesus, the one with authority, to build it. Rachel whispered into the dimly lit room, Jesus, be my rock. In this storm, in this winter, in this healing, build me on you. And for the first time, the wind outside didn't unsettle her. It reminded her that even in the fiercest storms, her foundation was changing, her heart was strengthening, her house would stand. The Sermon on the Mount is not just a list of commands. It is Jesus painting a portrait of a new kind of life, a kingdom life, a transformed heart, a life that can withstand storms. For Rachel, this teaching came during a harsh Montreal winter, when her heart felt just as cold and fragile as the ice outside. But through Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Jesus gently rebuilt her from the inside out. Matthew 5 reminded her that blessing is not the absence of pain, but the presence of God in the middle of it. The poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, the hungry souls. Jesus calls them blessed because his kingdom draws near to the broken. Matthew 6 revealed a Father who sees the hidden tears, the quiet prayers, the secret battles. A Father who knows what she needs before she asks. A Father who invites her to release worry and seek his kingdom first. Matthew 7 showed her that storms will come. Heartbreak, uncertainty, loneliness, unanswered questions. But the house built on the rock will stand. Jesus wasn't calling her to perfection, but to trust. Not to religious performance, but to relationship. Not to fear, but to foundation. The healing Rachel experienced is the healing Jesus still offers today. A blessed heart, a hidden life with the Father, a solid foundation built on Christ. Winter may come, storms may rise, but those who build their lives on His words will not fall before you leave this video. Take a moment to be honest with yourself. Where in Rachel's journey do you find your own heart? Are you standing in the Beatitudes, feeling broken but longing to be blessed? Are you in Matthew 6, learning to release worry and trust the Father who sees in secret? Or are you in Matthew 7, standing in a storm and choosing to rebuild on the rock? Share your reflection below. Your honesty may be the encouragement someone else desperately needs in their own winter season.